goes crazy. He's got all kinds of stuff going on. But we do have him now. And it's Mike Augello, of course, Pro Hockey Writers of America. He's a member of that. Hockey Buzz reporter, co-host of Off the Post Radio and Leafs Convo, NHL writer for Full Press. And if you recently, I think he just wrote something about Tage Thompson and Austin Matthews and the Leafs and Sabres rivalry, and they're kind of the reason behind the rivalry coming. And here he is. Hey, Mike.
Hey, guys. How you doing?
Good, thanks.
Hey, Mike. What's happening, Mike?
Yabba dabba doo with the French.
Yeah. I
it's
made
one of the
something.
water buffalo hats now, John.
I made something for Mike. Hold on, watch.
Uh-oh. Wow, you got to send me a copy of that.
Hey, you're snazzy. Mike, you're big time now, buddy.
Yeah, no, this guy comes on, and it's so cool that you'll come on with us whenever we ask. So thank you. You deserve that. That's your entrance music. It's like WWE.
Send me a link on that one.
I will. I'll send it when we get off. All right, we're a week away, and let's talk about the couple trades that happened. First big one was Maple Leafs, O'Reilly, Achari. What the Blues? What they get, Mike? Abramov, Gaudette.
Well, the Abramov and Gaudette were basically contracts being sent the other way. It was the draft picks. It was a 1, a 2, and a 3. A 4th round pick sent to Minnesota to retain 25% of O'Reilly's deal. Essentially the same type of package that Boston sent to Washington for Orlov and Hathaway. And if you ask me, I think what the Leafs got back from St. Louis is better than what Boston got, but Boston's needs were different. They wanted a defenseman who could play in the top 4 and a third or fourth line winger. And Hathaway is a typical Bruin. He's a cheap shot artist and a real physical guy. So he'll fit right in with the Bruins. With the Leafs, I mean, they needed that kind of leadership that O'Reilly brings. He won the Conn Smythe, he won the Stanley Cup with the Blues in 2019. After a lot of years with the Sabres in Colorado. He's still a good player, 32 years old. He's a free agent. I think that there's some hopes that the Leafs can maybe sign him extend him and bring him and sign him in the off season and keep him around for a few years. And based on what he's done so far with the hat trick against the Sabres, he's off to a good first step. But John, everything is going to rely on what the Leafs do in the playoffs against Tampa. And it'll be almost looked upon as a failure if they make this trade and then they don't win.
Right. Yeah. Tampa again. So it's just, let me ask you one thing. Were you surprised? Because I was, but maybe I'm just not smart enough. Game 1, when he was on the line with Tavares and Marner, for some reason, I thought for sure he'd have been the third line or whatever, however you want to call it. Does that happen, do you think, or no?
Yeah, I think the reason, and Sheldon Keefe explained this, is I think originally what they wanted to do with no practices, they just wanted to put O'Reilly in a position where he felt comfortable. And playing center and playing in a top 6 role and playing with 2 guys in Marner and Tavares who played with each other all year, that was sort of a comfort zone. And, he obviously did really well on Tuesday against the Sabres with the hat trick. Do I think it's permanent? No, I did. When the playoffs come around, I have a feeling it's going to be Matthews on one line, Tavares on another line, and O'Reilly on the third line, matching up against the other team's centers. I mean, with Tampa Bay, you can't load up on the top 6. I think one of the purposes of O'Reilly was to be able to spread out the talent in the forward lines, and he can match up against Braden Point while Matthews matches up with Anthony Cirelli. It gives them more flexibility. So I do think with the playoffs come around, it's going to be 3 separate lines.
Hopefully they'll be able to control Nick Paul because he's uncontrollable. Scott, I know you're a hockey kind of in and out guy watching it, but you're a Sabres fan, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was just going to ask Mike,
yeah,
Mike, I know they're still a young team.
Mm-hmm.
You got Tage Thompson, He's obviously, hopefully this is something that's going to continue going forward. I don't know how much you know about him. If that looks like he's made that leap and this is going to be, is this going to be a one season thing? Is he getting lucky, or you think this is just a continued progression with him?
Yeah. And I just wrote an article for Full Press, and it was about the different paths of Tage Thompson and Austin Matthews. And they were drafted in the same draft. Matthews number 1 overall. Tage Thompson was 26th by St. Louis. Matthews was successful right away. 4 goals in his first NHL game, Rookie of the Year, Hart Trophy, Rocket Richard Trophy, all the accolades, individual accolades. Thompson, he was traded in the O'Reilly deal. He played a little bit with Rochester. He got hurt. 1 year he was almost out all the year. He was misused by Ralph Kruger, played on the wing because he was big. And only when they fired Kruger and brought Don Granato in there did Granato have the foresight to move him to center, which he played in the National Development Program at Connecticut. He played up the middle. And that was only by happenstance. That was because Middlestat got hurt in training camp. So they moved him to center, and he scored 38 goals, and now he's already topped that, and we're 60 games into the season. So I think he's for real. And they signed him to a contract, and that was smart. It was proactive. I was a little skeptical about that because I thought, you've got another year and he's a free agent or a restricted free agent after that. You have time, but they're actually smart to have done it because he's had a big year, and he probably would have cost them $9.5 million on a new deal. So he's for real, and I like the Dylan Cousins signing, and they're going to get Dahlin signed. They're locking up all their young guys, and they're building something. I look at this team though, and as a lot of friends that I have are Sabre fans. The fact that this team has not made the playoffs since 2011, so now we're going on 12 seasons, and you're fairly close. You've got a young, exciting team that scores a lot of goals. Defensively, Dahlin is probably going to be one of the 3 finalists for the Norris. Owen Power is really coming into his own. They have some growing pains defensively. They have some areas to improve. I think it would be covered up a lot by good goaltending, and right now their goaltending is average. I mean, Eric Comrie, in my mind, Eric Comrie is an AHL goaltender. Craig Anderson's 41 years old and can play only once a week, and Luukkonen was rushed. And I was talking with a bunch of reporters when I was covering the Sabres-Leafs game on Tuesday. A lot of them were in agreement to say, if they just go out and get a goaltender, it doesn't mean you have to spend, trade significant assets, just trade a draft pick for a Jonas Korpisalo from Columbus or somebody like that. Yeah. Then you might improve your chances to make the playoffs. And Kevin Adams is coming out and saying, well, we're going to stick with our plan. Well,
why? That's my question. Why will they not address that? What, well, what? It always seems to be, other than when they had Hasek and Miller and them, when they had a solid goalie, it seems like they get a good team and they never want to address that situation.
I think they want to find out. Their goal this year is to find out whether Luukkonen can be a number 1. Now, maybe if they go out and trade for a goaltender, that's an admission that he's not. And they do like him. They do like, he's well liked in the locker room, all those things. But I don't think going out and trading for a veteran goaltender to split time with him is a statement of non-support to Luukkonen. I think it's a fact that Luukkonen has limited experience in the league. He sometimes looks fantastic and sometimes looks absolutely terrible, like he did on a couple of goals in the Toronto game that forced him to get pulled. So I think that, right now they're in a weird position. It's, Adams came out and said, we're going to stick with the plan, but then you start to hear some things behind the scenes that maybe they're looking at a goaltender, as long as it's cheap, as long as it's not going to derail what they're doing in other areas. So we'll find out before 3 p.m. on next Friday, but I think there's a chance they go out and trade for a goalie or trade for a defenseman, but who knows?
When you're this close, doesn't it? People are going to lose their mind. They always seem to be right up against it, right? Isn't it the norm?
I think
right up against it, and goaltending always seems to cost them.
Well, if it's not one thing, it's the other. I think there will be a lot of criticism. There's a lot of excitement for this team scoring all these goals, and I think a lot of people are excited for the future. But I think that a lot of fans want this streak of ineptitude to end now. So if it costs you a 3rd round pick to get a veteran goaltender, why wouldn't you do it? So I mean, we'll see what they do in the next 6 or 7 days.
Korpisalo would be something. He's been playing very well from what I understand since he came back from injury or whatever it was with him. That would be interesting. The next thing I wanted to ask you is about Minnesota, because we were just talking about Minnesota retaining salary left and right. Now they're a playoff team. Mm-hmm. Why do you think they're doing that? That's a weird thing for a playoff team usually, I believe.
It's called cash for draft picks. That's what they're doing. They've got the cap space, and what they're doing is they're acting as a middleman in these deals to get draft picks. They got a 4th round pick from Toronto. They got a 5th round pick from Boston. The thing is, it isn't costing them real money, because both O'Reilly in the deal with Toronto and Orlov in the deal with Washington to Boston through Washington, both of them had lots of signing bonus and very little base salary. So that mean, like, I guess for the O'Reilly deal, the cap hit was like 1.9 million, but the actual dollars prorated were 75,000. So, so they got a 4th round pick for $75,000. Basically, they got a 5th round pick for a lot less than whatever 25% of Orlov's deal was. So it makes sense for Bill Guerin to do this. And like I said, I looked up on Cap Friendly. They have like $8 million in cap space. So they have the room to operate. They have the room to do this. And maybe they flip those draft picks to get players that help them down the stretch for their own playoff pursuits.
I want to ask you first about teams, and then I'm going to ask you about some players. But the first thing I wanted to, when you're coming up to next Friday, who do you think, if you had to guess, is going to be the most active, or that we should be keeping an eye on?
I would say New Jersey, because they are the likely destination for Timo Meier. Yeah. Now that could change, but it's been fairly consistent that is where Meier wants to go. That's where he would sign a long-term deal. That's the team that has a lot of interest in him because, Nico Hischier and Jonas Siegenthaler are both Swiss players. They know Meier from their national program. So, he might be amenable to signing a long-term deal. I mean, the funny thing is it seems to be all the Eastern teams, not the West hasn't really gotten into it yet, but we know Tampa is going to make some move. They're very limited by cap space, but they're going to make a move because Toronto and Boston have. Carolina may be in on Meier. They may be in on somebody else because they lost Max Pacioretty to injury, so they have the cap space to operate. And obviously the Rangers, with what's going on with Patrick Kane, it sounds like that's the likely destination for Kane. He's sort of forcing his way to New York, like Claude Giroux forced his way to Philadelphia last year. But in the West, I think Dallas is going to add. I think Colorado is going to add. I think Vegas is going to add. I think Winnipeg is going to add. So, it's a question of how big and what. And like with Dallas, I think they were in on Kane, but if they don't get Kane, then they might go after somebody like James Van Riemsdyk because they need a winger to play in their top 6 and help with scoring. And, I think he can still do that, although defensively he's a little questionable. But, that's 6 or 7, that's 5 or 6 teams that I've sort of keeping my eye on.
Patrick Kane, if he doesn't go to the Rangers, what does he do? He'll be a free agent, right? So chances are he just won't go anywhere, right? Would you guess he'll probably just ride it out till the summer?
I think he's going to the Rangers, honestly. Yeah. He has a no movement clause, and I think he's going to force his way. He doesn't want to undercut the Blackhawks to not getting a good deal, but I think in the end, he came out and was pissed. Basically, sounded like he was pissed off that they traded for Tarasenko. So, because he thought that was his last opportunity to get to New York to play with Panarin. But it's very possible.
I always felt like Las Vegas would have been a nice spot for him. Could
Yeah,
have been.
there's not many relationships there with him from, I mean, like I said, Panarin is there for with the Rangers. He knows a few players like I think Jacob Trouba through USA Hockey. So, there are some connections there. I mean, mostly Panarin, but I mean, so I think there's. If I had to bet, I would bet he goes to the Rangers, but you can always see something change at the 11th hour.
The next one I'm interested in, and because he hasn't played in a while, is Chychrun. What do you think? Is he going to move?
Well, it's funny because I said this on the Buzzcast today. If the Coyotes don't trade him, if I was Chychrun, I would lose my mind. I'd probably sit, but the thing is then you don't get paid. Apparently they've kept him in the loop here, and he was all for not playing because they don't want to risk him getting hurt before getting traded. But they shut him down 2 weeks ago, and then a deal hasn't happened. So it's a question of whether they can get the deal done. There was talk about that deal with the LA Kings, then Boston, and Ottawa, and St. Louis, and there's so many teams that supposedly are in on Chychrun. But right now, you just don't know whether that's realistic or not. So, I mean, I wish I had an answer. Like all I said is there's not even a guarantee that he moves before the deadline. And if I was him, I would be so pissed off at the Coyotes management. But, it is what it is.
Hey, Mike, is one of those teams, because I know that I've heard him mentioned, is one of the teams sniffing around Buffalo?
About a month ago, I heard Buffalo in connection with Chychrun. I think it was Jeff Merrick from Sportsnet who mentioned that. And it sounded plausible because the Sabres, like players that have term on their contracts. He's the right age. He would be somebody who could help out the younger Dahlin and Power. But it would take 3 first-round equivalent assets. And if you look at the Sabres, that would be, say, Middlestat, Isaac Rosen, and a first-round pick. That's a hefty price to pay.
Yeah.
So,
Gotcha.
But, it might be worth it because he's a good he's not a number 1 defenseman, and they don't need a number 1 defenseman. They need, a number 2 or number 3 defenseman. And Power is going to be that in a year or two. He's a very young player. He's still learning, but he's really good. Chychrun's fully formed. He's 24 years old. He's had a lot of experience. It would make sense for a team like Buffalo that's looking to improve defensively to go in on him. But realistically, the last, I'd say, week to 2 weeks, I haven't heard them mention in connection with them.
Gotcha.
2 teams going in different directions, I think. Mm-hmm. The Capitals are sellers, right? That's weird.
Well, they lost this week. I think it was to Detroit. And at that point, their GM, Brian McClellan, I think recognized that their math in terms of making the playoffs look bad. Ovechkin was in Russia because his dad passed away, and they're slowly falling behind in the race. I mean, they're 4 points out of the second wild card, but they're 7 points out of the first wild card. So, it's like 1 chance in 4 that they make the playoffs. So they signed Dylan Strome to an extension. They signed Sonny Milano to an extension, but then in the same breath, they trade 2 pending free agents. So they're sort of doing 2 things at once. And that's typical of most teams. That you can be buyers and you can be sellers at the same time. I think they're never going to be a complete rebuild because I think I've heard it a few times before. They're not going to do that to Ovechkin because, they're trying to get him the record. But I mean, they're just a team that right now I think recognize that they're not close, that they're not going to win the Stanley Cup. And if you can get something for a guy that you tried to sign and wouldn't sign on the dotted line, then you have to move them. And they did.
And the one other team that's kind of always, the Penguins really got roughed up last night. They lost 7-2 to Edmonton. What are they, the second wild card right now?
They're the no, Florida is right now, but the Florida has played, I think, 3 or 4 more games than Pittsburgh. So games in hand. I mean, the Sabres have played 4 less than the Islanders and one of the other teams. So that's one of the Sabres' main advantages is that they played less games. Same thing with Detroit. Yeah, I mean, right now Pittsburgh is in a situation where, apparently their general manager and their coach are not on the same page in terms of, what they want to do. I mean, the report, I think it was Elliot Friedman that reported that they might be in on Chikrin, and Sullivan, the coach, wants to be in on him, and Hextall doesn't want to trade the prospects and picks to get him. He's trying to rebuild that organization, and with an aging Crosby and an aging Malkin, you're basically in the same situation in Pittsburgh than you are in Boston right now. You have to probably win in the next 1 to 2 years. Otherwise, all your core guys are getting old. So
a team though that isn't, I mean, they're exciting, is the Detroit Red Wings. What do you see for them at the deadline? I mean, I was hoping, Tyler Bertuzzi is no longer available, I'm sure.
They were going to trade players, and now because they're so close, I think they're going to hold on to them. There has been some talk about them getting into Timo Meier, or them getting into Chikrin, or them getting into, somebody who's got term left. But Yzerman is patient and, methodical. I don't think he'll make any moves out of turn. But if he sees that there's a chance to get that team in the playoffs, I think after missing 5 or 6 years in a row, that would be beneficial to them. I mean, the Sabres have not made the playoffs in 12 years, and they're sort of in the same boat.
And tonight, if you're a Sabres fan, it's basically a playoff game against Florida. Should be a good one for them in Florida. Second half of that Florida trip. Before I let you go, Mike, and I got to go back because, of course, I'm a Maple Leafs fan, and I know you are. When you cover games, you really can't be all that. But did they do enough to beat Tampa finally, do you think?
No. I mean, Don't get me wrong. I think O'Reilly is a really good ad. He's going to really help them out. Achari is a good third center, right-hand face-off guy. I think the moves they made were good and addressed areas of need for the team. My philosophy regarding Tampa, regarding the Leafs in Tampa, is I'll believe that they beat them when I see them beat them. This is a team that won 2 Stanley Cups, has been in 3 straight Stanley Cup Finals, and they have Vasilevsky and Hedman and Stamkos and Kucherov and all the guys that they have. Can Toronto beat them? Sure. Can they beat them? Prove it to me.
Real fast, does the goaltending concern you in Toronto at all?
No, it doesn't. I think the goaltending is vastly better than it was last year. Matt Murray is coming back from an injury. He's going to be on the trip. They have a 5-game road swing starting on Sunday, and he's going to be on the trip with them. Samsonov has played great. I actually think it's probably going to be a situation where they play both goalies in the playoffs, where maybe Samsonov plays at home and Murray on the road. But I do think that they are going to – the both goaltenders will be involved, and they're vastly better than what they were last year.
Well, Mike, I want to thank you as usual for joining us. Trade deadline Friday. We can watch on Buzzcast, right, from all day pretty much.
Yeah, I think on the deadline day we're probably going to start at noon. The deadline is 3 p.m. We'll probably go to 4 or 4:30 because it's sneaking in after the deadline. Yeah, I have a feeling that most of the big trades are going to happen leading up to it, and on deadline day it'll probably be a lot of like third round picks.
Well, Mike, once again, man, thank you. Stay warm. I know got to keep the electricity on.
Thanks, Mike.
No problem, guys. Anytime.
Take it easy. Have a good one, Mike.
See you, man.
All right, Scott. He was out of power for like 23 hours.
Oh my God, really?
Yeah, he lives out in
sucks.
I don't want to say where he lives, but he's out that way in Buffalo.
Sorry about that. I had to cut out there, man. My wife my wife pulled a John Rustino in the driveway.
She all right?
Yeah, she's okay.
Oh, good.
She's pissed off, but she's okay.
Yeah, I'll join the club. I don't know, man. And it's not going to get better because it's going to be super cold tonight.
It's not supposed to thaw out. The guy said that's the weather guy said the other day. It's that it's not even going to warm up enough to thaw any of it out. It's just ice. That sucks. Oh,
You know what?
I told him that. We talked about that earlier. She wanted to let you know she also fell yesterday.
Oh,
I have yet to break my ass.
I got it good, man. But when we come back from our commercial, I got some video I want to show you.
Okay.
I don't even tell you what it's about. I'll let you react to it. It's football related. It's about the quarterback stuff and all that. And I got a few games. Robin has a couple of games that we like tonight. And
did you hit a money line the other night?
What's that?